Hello, this is Power in the Word, and I'm Scott Reed. Thanks for joining me for this particular study session in our Come Follow Me New Testament. This particular study session is in the book of Revelation, chapters 17 and 18. Here we have a unique scene revealed as we look into the perspective of Babylon, how it has been established, and how it will be judged. So jumping into chapter 17, this scene is arranged in what is known as a chiastic structure, or chiasmus. You can see here in my heading, this particular lesson covers chapter 17, where Babylon, the wicked world, is unveiled, and chapter 18, where Babylon is judged. We will then see in our next lesson, chapter 19, where Christ then comes and is going to be victorious, and chapter 20, the millennial era begins, and Satan and those who follow him will receive their final judgment, and then a new world is unveiled. So you can see that A's match, B's match, C's match, and D, which is the center of the chiastic structure, is literally the pivotal point, and in chiasmus, that's the main point that the writer is trying to open to your view, which is the appearance of the Lord of Lords and King of Kings as he prevails over all his enemies. That can be found in the Ensign by Brother Ludlow when he talks about this particular book of Revelation. In your heading then, we'll see that John is shown Babylon. She's going to be given a name and a symbol and will be established throughout the world. So verse 1, there came one of these seven angels which had the seven vials from our last lesson, talking with John, who says, Come up here, and let me show you the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon the many waters. Now, that's really strong scriptural language. It's not the only place where Babylon is considered to be a whore. A great reference is here in Doctrine and Covenants, modern day, section 86, verse 3. In fact, let's peek at that one. Notice in verse 3, after the apostles have all been killed off or are asleep, and the great persecutor of the church, even the apostate, meaning traitor, the whore, even Babylon, depicting one that is filthy, and she is going to make all drink of her iniquity. So here is some pretty strong language. The persecutor of the church, the apostate, and the whore. Three good titles given in modern day Revelation. So note as we come back, this great whore sits upon the many waters, meaning the place of where all mankind resides. That coming later on in this chapter. We'll look at that. Note this great quote. The whore in Revelation 17:18 is specifically the satanic counterpart of the woman in chapter 12, who symbolizes the Church of Jesus Christ, which was forced into the wilderness. Remember, she being a bride. That is because inaccessible to human beings, this wilderness where she would go, denoting apostasy. But a place was there prepared where she could come out and be successful. Symbolizing the great and abominable church, the counterfeit as a whore underscores the nature of her evil. She is physically and spiritually unfaithful. That is, she represents both sexual immorality and idolatry, the twin abominations of the Old Testament. Adultery and idolatry actually come from a very similar root. Thus, she is the mother of abominations. It seems that in John's revelation, the symbol of the whore is used narrowly to represent false religions, while the beast, the image of the beast, and the horns of the beast serve to represent other aspects of the kingdom of the devil. So, good note, we also see that the judgment of the great whore means simply the punishment of the world of wickedness. The judgment is described in detail in these 2 chapters. Okay, so Babylon is looked at here as one who is unfaithful and physically and spiritually unclean. She's involved herself, you would say, in people's lives and have brought in worldliness. Verse 2 says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Meaning here, drunkenness here is a symbol of apostasy, in which the people lose the power of good judgment because of their unwise choices. They are drunken, but not with wine. Isaiah prophesied, they stagger, but not with strong drink. The wine that makes them drunk is not the fornication of sexuality, but that of unfaithfulness to God. So great insight. Notice, how then are the kings of the earth involved in committing this fornication or this unfaithfulness to God? Being involved with the whore or Babylon, the world. Notice the kings get involved. This list here is what Elder McConkie has given. They prohibit the worship of God. They enact laws defining religious beliefs and prescribing forms of worship. They maintain state-supported false systems of religion. They deny freedom of religious belief to all their citizens. They impose the religious beliefs of conquerors upon conquered people. They permit the mingling of religious influence with civil government. They foster one religious society and prescribe another. They deny to men their inherent and inalienable rights. Fail to guarantee the free exercise of conscience, the right and control of property, and the protection of life. They enact laws which curtail the agency of man. They require the teachings of false principles in their educational systems. They deny the representatives of certain churches the right to teach their doctrines or proselyte among their people. They fail to punish crime and protect the rights of their citizens, particularly the unpopular minority groups. So, great list. That's worth having in your scriptures on how the kings and leaders have been involved and with the world and have used that power wrongfully. Okay, verse 3. So he carried me away into the spirit, into the wilderness, and I saw a woman, so here's the whore, sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, So there's something there with scarlet, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads, so great imitation and counterfeit to Christ, and 10 horns, imitation of power, that we looked at in Revelation chapter 12. Now note, this is quite lengthy, but worth reading. The woman here, since God directs his total wrath against the harlot, understanding what she represents is important. First and foremost, she reeks with the stench of gross immorality. The figure of the harlot is used consistently in the Old Testament to represent spiritual apostasy, the deliberate and willful rebellion against God and his covenants. This disobedience results in a kind of false worship that draws strength and momentum and addiction from selfishness and pride. The harlot drinks from a golden cup filled with abomination and corruption. This stands in contrast to the golden chalice held by the Levitical high priest and used in the temple for making a wine offering to God. But this is not the only imitation of holy things that John associates with the woman. Purple and scarlet comprise her clothing. These colors, along with white and blue, dominate the fabric of the veils and interior of the temple, as well as the vestments of Israel's high priest. Further, the high priest wore a mitre. Remember, a headpiece engraven upon a golden plate. Fastened to it were the words "Holiness to the Lord," which identified the priest as the Lord's own. Something that you see on top of temples today as a nameplate. The whore also wears an inscription upon her brow, proclaiming her threefold status. Notice, as mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and abomination of the earth. Unlike the high priest, she belonged to no one. No covenant ties her to one order or loyalty. She is faithful only to herself. Through these images, John paints the picture of a priestess, harlot, standing as a counterfeit high priest. The woman therefore represents more than rulers or nations with their attendant power. The woman epitomizes a religious philosophy or a theological system through which men are seduced to worship the dragon. For this reason, she combines elements of both the first and the second beast we've looked at, but more especially those of the false prophet mentioned in Revelation 13. She bears the name Mystery. Significant, the word not only makes up part of her name, but also stands as a leading element. The term generally refers to the most important teachings and doctrines of God kept from the profane world. Paul speaks of the apostles as stewards of the mysteries of God. Only the power of the Holy Ghost reveals these mysteries, which remain in the temple and constitute in large measures the mysteries of God. The woman represents counterfeit ordinances with their secret oaths and binding covenants, a kind of pseudo-worship containing secret combinations of murder and all manner of secret works of darkness. These are the combinations of the devil, for he is the founder of all these things. These combinations constitute the abominations of the earth. They also form the last part of the harlot's title. So, worth reading through. You see a great counterfeit in Satan establishing Babylon versus Christ. Verse 4, The woman was arrayed, as we mentioned, purple, symbol of royalty, scarlet, symbol of blood, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. We've looked at those. We're going to talk more about this word arrayed or decked, okay, a little bit later. Verse 16 in the next chapter. Upon her forehead was the name written, Mystery, Babylon, the great mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, as we've mentioned. So Babylon isn't just, it represents all the world. Babylon's in the church of the devil. Babylon is all the evil, degenerate, vile things of this world, Elder McConkie would add. Great quotes here, given both by Elder McConkie, that help summarize that Babylon is the false, degenerate religions, as well as the way of nations and kingdoms, as well as those secret combinations of murder and unrighteous dominion. All of those represent Babylon. So great quotes that you might want to look at. Verse 6, John says, I saw the woman drunken with, notice, the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. We actually looked at that in Revelation chapter 6. So you may want to have that reference back there. 7, the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, then he gives definitions here. These are the important verses because they help define our scriptures. Here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. So we have definition here. Note 7 mountains may have a veiled reference to the 7 mountains on which Rome was built. We know that the city of Rome was built on 7 hills. I've listed them for you here. And then would only figuratively identify Babylon, not specifically as Rome. Note here, if that identification is correct, then it should be understood figuratively as representing the seat of corruption. In John's day, it was Rome, and not as a specific prophecy of Rome's involvement in the future. Okay, there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, past. 1 is currently reigning, and the other is yet to come. So we're going to have to look at those kings. Note about the 7 kings. The precise identity of the kings is not as important as their function in the vision. The 7 kings may represent many kings of the earth, and the number 7, which indicates perfection or completeness, may tell us that all the kings of the earth as a whole are a part of the beast and supportive of the evil woman. Of the 7 kings symbolized by the beast's 7 heads, 5 were already dead at the time of John's vision of the book of Revelation. The 6th was currently reigning, and the 7th had not been born and had not come to power as yet. Ultimately, we can only speculate as to whom these 7 kings might be. We don't know. And verse 11 says, And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. And with the 7, they will all go into perdition. Okay, here's another interpretation. The 10 horns which thou sawest are the 10 kings, which represent no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. In other words, they associate themselves for an hour with the world. Note, Joseph Fielding Smith said, Satan has control now. No matter where you look, he is in control, even in our own land. He is guiding the governments as far as the Lord will permit him. That is why there is so much strife, turmoil, and confusion all over the earth. One mastermind is governing the nations. It is not the President of the United States. It is not Hitler. It is not Mussolini. It is not the king or government of England or any other land. It is Satan himself. So there's a good note. And note, be sure that you underline 1 hour. If you're going to play in the world for 1 hour, notice that will be balanced with perfect judgment against you in 1 hour. So there's a counter. If you want the world and play in the world and have all that it offers, then there will be 1 hour of judgment that will come. And that 1 hour is talked about perfectly in this next chapter. It'll be mentioned, you can see, several times here in Revelation 18. Okay, they, notice, all have one mind, shall give their power and strength to the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, but the Lamb shall overcome. You might want to darken that. Okay, he will win, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, as we've mentioned. Verse 12, another definition. Be sure you darken. The waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth was people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Note, there's a list of 4 noting mankind. So the whore sits upon or is involved in all mankind. She sits upon the waters. Okay, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these, remember the 10 horns, they shall hate the whore and shall make her desolate, naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So there's 4 things, okay? Desolate, naked, partake of her flesh, and burn her with fire. There are some great symbols involved in this. Note, those who are involved in the world still can't stand it. This eternal principle is revealed. Those who participate in the world hate that they're involved and are not happy. Remember Alma, who teaches wickedness never was happiness. And in the end, they hope to expose her. They desire to make her desolate and naked, and will betray her and war against those who are involved with her. So remember that eternal principle. Next, that they make her naked suggests in Revelation 16:15 that she has no covering. Therefore, her shame is going to be exposed. She lacks a covering or has no atonement to cover. Remember, that's what the Hebrew word kafar translates atonement. It means to cover. And she has no covering in her sin or her shame. The next one is they will burn her. Now, that's fascinating scripture. Notice Babylon must burn. There's a great Doctrine and Covenants verse in section 64, verse 23. Remember, if you do not involve yourself in tithe and offering, you shall be burned. That's verse 23. Okay? And it continues. It's also interesting to note that under the law, the Mosaic law, a daughter who profanes herself. Okay? So remember that we are likened to a woman, scripturally, symbolically, and if we make ourselves to play the role of a whore, that, according to the law of Moses, would end up then being burned. Here, let's look at it just for a second. Notice, the daughter of any priest, so we are daughters of the high priest himself. And if she profanes herself by playing the whore, she profaneth her father. Consequence, she shall be burned with fire. So this is only in fulfillment of law, that Babylon must burn, for she is been playing this role of this evil woman. Okay, verse 17. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. There's a great footnote, by the way, in 17b. Let me show you. Here's 17b, back to Doctrine and Covenants 1, verse 37. Until the words of God be fulfilled. It should sound familiar. Note the three infinitive clauses in this verse, and I've outlined them for you: to fulfill, to agree, and to give, describe exactly what God will do to get the kings to turn on the whore. First, he will inspire them to do his will, albeit they will not recognize him. Second, he will inspire them to be of one accord, to agree. And third, he will inspire them to let the beast use their kingdoms for his purpose. In this way, John shows that God is still the one in control of all that is going on from its inception. He knows, understands, has power, and is behind the whole thing. Okay, our last verse in this chapter, note, and the woman which thou sawest is the great city. Oh, we just got a definition. Okay, the woman, the whore, notice, is the great city you know as Babylon, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So to close out, notice the final entry of chapter 17 is the bridge to the idea presented in the next chapter. John shifts the imagery of this established evilness in Babylon, the whore, to be a great merchant city, which he's going to talk about in the next chapter. The great city is known as Babylon. In the turning world of Revelation's imagery, the apostate woman now assumes a new form. Here, however, the central idea is not religious apostasy or political power, but the seduction lure of wealth, of money. And so we'll see that switch, that turn, as that lure is thrown out by Babylon. So let's peek into our next chapter. Remember, chiastically, we've established that she is through all the world. We've unveiled her for who she is and for those who are involved in her. Now we will have her judged. So chapter 18, the saints are called out of Babylon, lest we get involved in her, because she's going to go down and she's going to fall along with her supporters. That's what this chapter is about. Good heading. Okay, let's jump straight into verse 2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon, the great is fallen. This angel screams out that he's going down and has become the habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Now, good symbolism. Notice here in Isaiah 21:9, we've given that to you as he talks about it. And Doctrine and Covenants modern day, section 88, verse 105. Talks about Babylon falling. That's not anything new. We saw that happen in the beginning of time, and it's going to allude to that here in a minute. Next, to have her be the cage of every unclean or hateful bird. Note, carrion, okay, birds that eat other birds, those ones who partake of flesh, are according to the law of Moses unclean. There, I've given you, here's the great word of wisdom of the Mosaic law in Leviticus chapter 11. So when you see Babylon here then is associated with the judgment that are going to come upon those who have been rebellious or who are unclean. Like those unclean fowl. Verse 3, all nations have drunk. All kings of the earth have committed fornication. All the merchants of the earth wax rich because of the abundance of her delicacies. The world has a lot to offer. And we're going to see that lure of what she says to you and I, that if you want to be involved, you'll prosper. You will have this materialism. Okay, notice Elder Christofferson concerning that all nations have drunk of this this materialism. He says, we might ask ourselves, living as many of us do in societies that worship possessions and pleasures, whether we are remaining aloof from covetousness and the lust to acquire more and more of this world's goods. Materialism is just one more manifestation of the idolatry and pride that characterizes Babylon. Perhaps we can learn to be content with what is sufficient for our needs. What a great verse, and what a great time to talk about moving away from materialism and moving towards our God and being content with what He has allowed each of us to have. Verse 4. I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Now, the very first thing I would be sure that you darken is the plea to come out of her. I would darken that. That is perfect language in our scriptures as well. Notice I've given you section 133 of the Doctrine and Covenants. Come out of Babylon is going to be mentioned several times. But if you're going to come out of the world in Babylon, where are you coming to? Well, you come out of Babylon and you come to Zion. Okay? That's the plea. And so note this out of section 133 of the Doctrine and Covenants. This was known as the appendix, or the end of the Doctrine and Covenants. This is the one that represented, if you will, the end of time or the coming of Christ. Note verse 7, come out of Babylon. It's down here in verse 14. Go ye out from among the nations, even from Babylon. And then, where do you come? If you come out of Babylon, which means, notice, to mix, mingle, or to confuse. It's not necessarily the language, but the involvement, the infusing and mixing with you with the world. Notice, Babylon does not give exit permits gladly, Elder Maxwell said. It wants you to have a foot in the world and a foot in covenants. We cannot. That's a two-minded man. Cannot have two masters. Elder Maxwell said again, even if we decide to leave Babylon, some of us endeavor to keep a second residence there, or we commute on weekends. So make up your mind, leave Babylon, okay, and come to Zion. Verse 9. Behold, and lo, get excited. This shall be their cry, the voice of the Lord unto all people. Go ye out from forth unto the land of Zion, that the borders of my people may be enlarged, that her stakes might be strengthened. Yeah, that's Isaiah language. And that Zion may go forth unto the regions round about. Come out of Babylon and come to Zion. Zion, and I would darken then these two phrases, Zion is a word that literally means a monument raised up, which is what Zion is. If we can become a Zion-like people, we can be raised up. You see that? That's what translation is. Or being raptured, taken up into heaven, because we've established Zion. It's a monument, okay? Raised up. So there's the good instruction that we have modern day, is to come out of this this involvement of Babylon and come to Zion. Notice he begs for those who are involved to come out of her, my people. That's deity's direct plea to his people, meaning covenanted Israel, those who have made covenants. Okay? Don't live the double standard life. Come out. Stay out. That ye be not partakers of her sin and be involved in her plagues. Note, there is a great symbol of agency. That you partake not of her sin. You have the choice. But notice, if you choose to be involved, then you cannot choose the consequence. You will be involved in plagues. You see, that's a great example of true agency, is that there is a choice to be made. Stay in the world or leave it. But once you have decided, your action, to the consequence to your action is already done. It's been made. So there's a great verse that describes this involvement and the consequence, one way or another. Okay, verse 5. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. That reached unto heaven is a very interesting phrase. That is exactly the same phrase that is used in Genesis 11, 4 through 9, in the Tower of Babel. So here we have, in the beginning of time, in our Old Testament, Babylon has been raised, and now in the latter days, we're right back where we started. We see the establishment of Babylon, or the Tower of Babel, again. And note what happened in the beginning. There was a demise, is going to happen again. And so I've given you that old adage that certainly applies here. Notice this philosopher, those who cannot remember the past, or we would say sometimes learn from the past, are condemned to repeat it again. And so we see that. Don't get involved. We've seen her be built up and fall, and that's what's going to happen again. Old Testament happened, now we see it in New Testament, repeated. Verse 6, reward her, the whore or Babylon, even as she rewarded you. In other words, you deal with her exactly as she has dealt with others, according to the law. Now note, the word here that is going to be repeated, the principle is double unto her, double according to her works. So in the cup that you fill for her, you have to double what's there as a consequence. Excuse me. That is law. Notice, according to Mosaic law, Babylon was to receive double portion of punishment, because that's exactly what a thief was to have as a consequence. Because she has been the thief of eternal life, she must then have a double portion given to her. Here's the verse. Notice right here, if a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to keep, and it be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, let him pay double. That's according to the Mosaic law, Exodus 22, verse 7. Okay? Or restore double in verse 4. So here's this idea that she must have, as a thief of eternal life, she must receive double the consequence. And so we see a fulfillment now of all three things that are being dealt out as consequences to the abomination of the world, or Babylon. Notice, here they are, a great list to make. 1, if you enjoy her pleasures, you must enjoy her judgment. Okay? Both for exactly the same time, for an hour. Second of all, if she pretends to play in the world, then as a whore, she must, as consequence, be burned to death. We looked at that one. And here, her destruction then must be doubled. Those are the three, all according to law. Okay. How much then she has glorified herself, and she has lived deliciously, and has said in her heart, notice this, I would be sure to darken verse 7, I sit a queen. Okay? I am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Those are interesting phrases out of her own mouth. Notice she has lived deliciously. We're going to see the dainties and the things that Babylon and the world offer in verses 12 and 13 of this chapter. But to actually declare herself a queen who has no widow and has no consequence of sorrow is telling. Notice, if she is queen, she's maybe saying what you and I would say or have heard, now is the great day of my power. And If I see no sorrow, none shall fill or make afraid. And certainly, if she has no widow, then she has been married to those who are involved with her, the kings of the world and so forth. Notice, offering security and an inheritance, because that is what a married woman has. Okay? In their day, if you weren't married, there's no inheritance and security. Isaiah 47 talks about that. And therefore, she would state as one who partook of her, Cain, right? Who declared himself, I am free. I have no consequence. There is no sorrow for my action. So, interesting verbiage here in verse 7. Therefore, now notice, because of that above, that's what therefore always alludes to. Notice, she shall have plagues. Come, in one day, death, 1, mourning, 2, famine, 3, and she shall be utterly burned. There's that. Burned with fire that we've seen before. 8b, okay, gives you verses of burning that I've alluded to. All of them are excellent, okay? And therefore come plagues. Now, in Old Testament times, Deuteronomy 28 talks about the plagues that certainly will come upon a wicked people if they break their covenants and are involved with the world. So here's a fantastic cross-reference. Verse 9. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously. There's that word again. I'd be sure to get it. We're going to look here just in a second at what the world is going to offer. Will see the smoke of her burning. So she's going to be burned. That's what happens to the wicked, remember? And the witnessing of the philosophies, the smoke of her burning is a way to say they will view or witness the philosophies and the lifestyles of the world coming to an end. And they stand afar off for fear of her torment. But we don't want to be involved in the plagues, okay, of that great city Babylon. For in 1 hour, there's that's, you played in the world for 1 hour, here comes the consequence. In 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth, notice, here's what the world offers, okay? And no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. It's come to an end. But here's what they offered. Babylon's merchandise consists of 28 items, the luxuries and delicacies of the world. Notice, gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, woods, ivories, most precious woods, brass, iron, marble, cinnamon, odors, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beasts like sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and souls of men. There's the things that the world can guarantee you, at least for a time. Now, there's a couple of interesting things here in this list. First of all, notice how many times we would just put a comma after gold, comma, silver, comma, precious stones, comma, pearls, comma, and so forth. But Hebrew, the writing of the Bible, always put and in the middle. That's not good English, but it is good Semitic language. That is another proof. The Book of Mormon, which uses this same verbiage, okay, it has and gold and silver, it does the same thing, is not from Joseph Smith, but of more ancient origin. So there's a little proof for you of your Book of Mormon. Another interesting note is this idea of the word slaves and souls. Notice, Doctrine and Covenants 88 verse 15 says, the soul of man is both the body and the spirit. Notice the world it deals with men's souls. That is a scary thought. But here's the other one that I would want to talk about. See this word slave right here? In fact, I'm going to put a little bit of underline for you there. Okay? Here's the word slaves. The word is soma, or it literally translates as body. So the old Hebrew euphemism or phrase is that they deal with men and women's bodies, or little more than livestock, as the old phrase is used. Mankind is dehumanized by the consorts of Babylon. So the world uses men and women's bodies. We see it not only as human trafficking, for slavery, but also in pornography, as the world deals with human beings, God's own children. Okay, and here's that phrase again. These are the dainties, or the goodly things that are offered by Babylon, but note, thou shalt find them no more at all. They will cease. In the judgment of Babylon, okay, all these things will end. Now the merchants of these things, they stand afar off too, like the kings. We don't want to be involved in the plagues, but you played in the world. You cannot, if you decide, remember, you cannot decide the consequence. And so there will be. Verse 16, and saying at last, the great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple, scarlet, decked with gold, precious stones, and pearls. There's a good list for you. Okay? Notice, she's been clothed and decked. Those are interesting words as well. Note here, I've given them to you in the Greek. Okay? Clothed means arrayed, or clothed, or to put on. Would it not have been better than to wear or put on the things of God rather than the things of the world? Rather than fine linen or purple or scarlet, how about putting on? The word put on literally translates as endow or endowment, with deity's vestments rather than that of the world. The idea here is that the world offers a perfect counterfeit. Okay? Instead of clothing you in the world's things, you put on the armor of God. That's the literally translation. Look at that. To put on. And Ephesians 6:11 uses that idea of putting on the armor of God. Well, we're going to see that in direct correlation, okay, in stark opposition to the bride who puts on a dress in the next chapter, in next lesson. So you either put on the things of the world or you put on the things of God and become his bride. Next is the word decked. Isaiah 61:10 notes that we deck ourselves with ornaments. If you look at the word ornaments in Isaiah 61:10, it talks about the clothing of temple. We deck ourselves in ornaments or in special, unique clothing that is completely counter to the world's gold, stones, and pearls. So, some interesting opposition here that you're seeing in these counterfeits or opposites. John does fantastic job at always pointing those out. Note, and for 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. So you played in it, the world, for an hour, and now the hour of consequence, it's gone. Okay, verse 17, verse 19, it's gone. For 1 hour is she made desolate. It's gone. Okay, all this continually pointing as a balance. Verse 20, rejoice over her, thou heaven, ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. Okay, in other words, you begged for being avenged in Revelation 6, 9 through 11, those who kept their testimonies and loved the Word of God, holy saints of God, and were killed for it. Now comes your avengement. 21. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone. Notice, thus was violence shall that great city Babylon being thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. So the great idea of a millstone put around Babylon's neck and thrown into the sea and drowned and cannot be found anymore. That's a great likening or a simile. Notice, as prophesied by Jeremiah. I love these verses. Fun little ones to catch throughout Scripture. Notice Jeremiah, pretty good at defining what has just happened. Notice these verses. You may want to be sure to underline them. Jeremiah in chapter 51, just the last 5 verses, states, so Jeremiah wrote in a book all the evil that should come upon Babylon. See, in his day, Babylon was coming against the Lord's people too. Even all these words that are written against Babylon. Okay, here's the cross-reference that we just came from, Revelation 18:21. And Jeremiah says, notice, when thou comest to Babylon and shalt see and shalt read all these words, then shalt thou say, O Lord, thou hast spoken against this place, to cut it off. It won't remain anymore, that none shall remain in it, neither the man nor the beast, but that it shall be desolate forever. That's exactly what Revelation just said. And it shall be, when thou hast made an end of reading this book, thou shalt bind a stone to it, put the stone around it, and cast it into the midst of water, like the Euphrates. And thou shalt say, thus shall Babylon sink and shall not rise, from the evil that I will bring upon her, and they shall be weary. Thus were the words of Jeremiah. And John, his language in this chapter is almost identical. So notice Babylon is going to be thrown into the waters with a stone around its head, and it's going to be left desolate in 19 and rise no more at all, verse 21. So great cross-reference found in Jeremiah 51. So you have it, the voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters, they're not going to be heard anymore. Craftsmen, they're not going to be found anymore. Okay? The sound of a millstone, that's not going to be found anymore. All these things that suggested happiness and joy and good living, materialism, prosperity, all of this will be gone. Thus, verse 23, the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, Babylon. And the voice of the bridegroom, Christ, and the bride, his church, shall be heard no more at all in thee, Babylon. Okay, they're going to be taken, and Babylon will face its consequence. For thy merchants, okay, these merchantmen that had so much, were the great men of the earth, for by their sorceries were all nations deceived. Okay, notice this interesting verse also out of Jeremiah. Okay, 25 verse 10 is almost exactly the same wording as we just had in 22 and 23. Jeremiah 25, notice, moreover I will take from them voice of mirth, voice of gladness, voice of bridegroom, voice of bride, sound of millstones, the light of the candle. All this, okay, it will be gone, will be left desolate, and the astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. You see this same language that happened in Old Testament times now happens again, and all that Babylon offered, which people think is happiness and joy and great possessions, is all gone. And notice, there is no light of a candle or worldly light. The sources of Babylon's light and stars and candles were used for guidance, for light. Notice, the stars of the world are, or the light of the world, literally is what we call movie stars, or music icons, or sports stars. All that offered light and guidance and direction are gone. Only the light of the world himself can offer true direction and light. Note, I talked to you about this verse right here in verse 23, that the merchants were the great men of the earth, for by their sorceries were all nations deceived. I gave it to you back in Revelation chapter 9, but probably worth repeating. Merchants are great men. By definition, the Greek word here is lords. Great men is translated as magistanes or magistrates or lords. We have sorceries here in verse 23, translates into the word pharmakia, or pharmacy is what we use in the English language today. It's medication or drugs. So clearly the merchants of the world are the drug lords of the earth, for by their drugs, their pharmacy, their illegal and legal use of medication and drug, deceive all nations. And we see clearly then that the Revelator saw a rampant use of drugs in the last days. President Benson, we give you warning that Satan and his emissaries will strive to entice you to use harmful substances, because they well know if you partake, your spiritual powers will be inhibited, and you will be in their power. Sound familiar? They will be in my power. So I looked up to close this, the most expensive substances in the world today. Notice we have interesting list here down to verse 8. LSD. Okay? Cocaine, heroin, and meth. 4 of the great substances today in the latter days make the most expensive substance list of 16 in the world. Interesting. Maybe the drug lords of the world, the merchants, do rule the nations of the world through their substance. And he closes, and in her was found the blood. So in her is Babylon, was found the blood of prophets and of saints, as we mentioned earlier, and all that were slain upon the earth. Okay? All those righteous, good saints whose blood was spilt upon the ground by those who would be in the world, now cannot be found anymore. They will have been judged. It's interesting, this note, by the way, in her was found the blood. Oh, notice the word found is actually past tense. No more. These saints and prophets will be avenged by God. So, past tense. It's not there anymore. He is taking care of it. So, here's maybe a great place to end as we watched Babylon rise, exposed, and now fall again. This is maybe a great place to end as we look at a cross-reference 3 Nephi 28, 34, and 35. Out of the Book of Mormon, note, if we go to Book of Mormon, 3 Nephi, chapter 28, and come down to verse 34 and 35, it states, "Woe be unto him that will not hearken unto the words of Jesus, or also to them whom he hath chosen and sent," that's prophets and apostles, "among them from whoso receiveth not the words of Jesus, and the words of those whom he hath sent receive not him. Therefore he will not receive them at the last day." 35, "And it would be better for them if they had not been born." I consider that, I always tell my students, the second scariest verses in all of Scripture. To actually think that it would be better for us to have stayed in heaven because we at least were in the presence of God there, than to come down, to be involved in Babylon, and then to kill prophets and saints, and not be able to return home. It would be a terrible thing. So it would be better for them if they had not been born. Well, I'm grateful for your attendance today in this lesson. I think that I helped expose some of those things in Revelation 17 and 18. I hope that you were aided in your scripture study and you could see the power of the word there, and you'll return again with me as we finish up our book of Revelation. 2 more lessons, 19, 20, and then 21 and 22. I witness that these things are all around us. If we just open our eyes, for those who have eyes to see, do see the encroachment of the world today in immorality and in substance, materialism, and pray that we might try to be true saints of God as we separate ourselves and come out of Babylon and establish ourselves in Zion as covenanted Israel. That is my prayer, and grateful for your friendship, and wish you a great day in studying scriptures. Till then.